The California redwoods stretched above us like ancient guardians, their towering heights casting long shadows over our hiking trail. My two best friends, Tom, Jess, and I had embarked on a 15-mile backpacking trip, hoping to immerse ourselves in the beauty of the forest. About halfway into our hike, as the sun set below the canopy, we stumbled upon an area in the woods that sent out a creepy vibe. Nestled deep within the woods stood a tiny, run-down shack that seemed plucked from the pages of a witch's fairy tale or the story of the Blair Witch. The shack's wooden walls were weathered and rotting, and the windows were covered in grime. It sat eerily silent, surrounded by tall trees that loomed overhead. Sticks and animal bones dangled from twine, forming bizarre symbols that swayed with the wind. Cautiously, we approached the eerie cabin, our footsteps soft as we walked across the moss-covered forest floor. We didn't see anyone nearby, so we peeked through a dirty window. We strained our eyes to see inside. The room was dimly lit by the fading daylight, revealing no signs of life. But in the corner, we noticed coals still smoldering in a fire pit. Someone had been here recently. The woods had grown eerily silent, as if nature itself held its breath. A stack of animal bones lay scattered in the cabin's yard. A black cat with mysterious green eyes stared out at us from a distant tree stump, which made us feel uneasy for some reason. Black cats were said to be signs of bad luck, but this seemed like something more. It felt like an omen. We decided not to linger. We turned away from the shack and continued on our hike, putting distance between us and that strange place. The forest around us seemed to sigh in relief as we moved forward. Hours passed without incident as we trekked deeper into the woods. The sun set below the horizon and the moon began to rise. We set up camp, trying to shake off the lingering unease from our encounter with the witch-like cabin. Around our campfire, we shared stories and laughter, attempting to push aside the creeping sense of dread. Yet no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't escape the memory of those eerie symbols and crude ornaments hanging in the trees. The rest of the night was uneventful, but none of us slept soundly. We all had a feeling that whoever lived in that little shack was up to something strange and disturbing. We continued on and finished our hike around the 15-mile loop and had no other disturbing experiences. We may never know the true nature of who was living in that shed and why they were up there, but we had no intention of returning to find out either. The beauty of the redwoods is definitely breathtaking, and I would encourage anyone who has never seen them to definitely check them out. But I would caution you to be prepared, because you might just encounter something out there. The crisp Colorado air greeted us as we ventured into the wilderness. My two buddies and I were on a backpacking trip we'd been planning for months. The towering pines and rugged terrain of the Rocky Mountains surrounded us, providing the perfect backdrop for our adventure. As we hiked along the winding trail, we stumbled upon a man who seemed out of place. He was dressed in tattered clothing, had few teeth in his mouth, and for some reason made us feel uncomfortable. "Hey there, folks," he greeted us with a toothless grin. "Where are you headed on this fine day?" We're just backpacking," I replied, cautiously exchanging glances with my friends. The stranger engaged us in some small talk, asking about our plans and the trail conditions. Something about him made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on it. After a few minutes, he bid us farewell and continued down the trail in the opposite direction. We shrugged off the encounter and continued on our way. Nightfall descended upon us. and as we set up our camp in a secluded spot near a small stream, we nestled into our sleeping bags. We heard whispers and hushed voices, voices off a bit in the distance that didn't belong to any of us. I started to get nervous when I realized we weren't alone. I whispered to my friends, "Do you hear that? There are people out there." We strained our ears, trying to discern the conversation taking place just beyond our tents. The intruders seemed to be getting closer. Panicked, I reached for my backpack, where I kept a small hunting knife, and whispered, "I've got a knife. If they get any closer, we need to scare them off." We yelled from our tents, trying to sound as fierce as possible. "Get away! We have a gun, and we'll shoot if you don't leave us alone." The voices outside grew hushed, and then we heard hurried footsteps retreating into the darkness. Our bluff had worked, but we didn't dare leave our tents until we were certain they were gone. Morning came, and we cautiously emerged from our tents. We saw no sign of the intruders, so we began to relax, thinking we had scared them away for good. Our relief was short-lived. Near the smoldering remains of last night's campfire, we found a chilling message scrawled on a scrap of paper. It read, "If you ever come back to these woods again, we will end your life." What the hell? Who were these people? And why had they targeted us? We couldn't comprehend why they would leave such a threatening letter for us. Our once enthusiastic backpacking trip had turned into a nightmare. We packed up our gear as quickly as possible, leaving no trace of our presence behind. The wilderness that had once beckoned us with its beauty now seemed hostile and foreboding. As we hiked back along the trail, the eerie feeling of being watched never left us. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant sound sent shivers down our spines. We vowed never to return to that trail again.